Of course, as you all know, that in the first two episodes, I've stated that applications now need to be explicitly asking consent for pretty much everything. But what if I told you that DPDP Act actually recognizes that some data processing doesn't need consent? And in this third episode, I'll reveal the 9 legitimate use provisions that could transform your compliance strategy. There are also people who are confused whether they need consent to process salaries and so on and so forth. So the answer reveals why section 7 is the most important yet misunderstood part of the DPDP Act. And section 7 of the DPDP Act lists 9 scenarios where you can process data without explicit consent. Now, get these wrong, and you will either over engineer your product with unnecessary consent flows or under comply and face penalties. So, the first one is voluntary provision of data. If a user voluntarily gives you data for a specific purpose and doesn't explicitly object, you can process it for that exact purpose. User fills a contact form, you can contact them, but only for the reason they filled the form. Second, government benefits and services. This is huge for fintech and health tech products. If you're helping users access government services, different rules apply. Third, and this is critical, performance of state functions. Government departments and their processors have broader provisions. Building GovTech, this is your section. Fourth, legal obligations. If any Indian law requires you to process data, consent becomes secondary. Tax compliance, KYC requirements, court orders that override consent requirements fall under this ambit. Fifth, medical emergencies. Healthcare platforms pay attention. Life threatening situations don't need consent forms, but the definition of emergency is very, very strict. Sixth, employment purposes. This is a game changer for HRMS platforms. Processing employee data for legitimate employment purposes doesn't need repeated consent. Payroll, statutory compliance, workplace safety, these are all covered under this. But employee surveillance, performance analytics for third parties, these are not covered. And hence, you will need to figure out and factor in consent over here. Seventh, public interest during disasters. Crisis management platforms, emergency services, disaster response systems have special provisions. 8. Legal proceedings. Data needed for court cases, arbitration, legal claims can be processed without fresh consent. And the last one, the most interesting one, is research and archiving. Anonymized data for statistical purposes has exemptions, but the anonymization standards are very, very strict. And here is where companies might mess up. They think legitimate use means no compliance needed, which is actually not true. You still need to inform users, maintain security, and respect other rights. Legitimate use only exempts you from consent, not from other six principles. Now, an example that I would like to talk about here is, for example, an HRMS platform which has been processing employee biometric data claiming employment purpose exemption. But biometric data for attendance has been explicitly ruled as needing consent. The exemption applies to necessary employment data, not all employment related data. The smartest product builders are now redesigning their data architecture around all these provisions. Instead of consent for everything, they are restructuring data flows to maximize legitimate use while minimizing consent requirements. And here's the catch: misuse these provisions, claim legitimate use where it doesn't apply, and penalties will actually double. The act punishes willful misrepresentation very, very harshly. And in episode 4, I'll show you how to redesign your product features around these provisions, including a framework that we are using to balance compliance with user experience. Remember, legitimate use isn't to be treated as a loophole. It's a recognition that in the real world, not every data interaction needs a consent form. Please use this provision wisely. Follow me for more such insights. Thank you.